All right, we got a jam-packed episode coming up for you today. Still buzzing off of that come from behind victory, the rookie charge over the Toronto Raptors. We go ahead and talk a little bit more about Kevin Durant and the value that he brings to a young team like that out on the court, and then tap into another rookie in Day'Ron Sharpe, young player, obviously on the rise, and Nic Claxton, Cam Thomas's performance. We're just going to really take away as much as we can from that sample size and then look ahead, knowing that the Brooklyn Nets are going to be a limited roster for the foreseeable future. What positives can we carry over as we look at that very difficult matchup in Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's the key. Like this team that we got really excited about against the Toronto Raptors, this is going to kind of be the team here for a little bit. And I think that probably, we pump the brakes for a second, but also look at a lot of the positives around some of these young guys, what to expect. This is a fun one because you got to talk a little bit more in detail about that awesome win over the Raptors. We're going to get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am at Adam Armbrecht, covering the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast with my boy Andy Mack. And over there is at Doug Norrie, Blue Check certified, owner-operator, DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings, FanDuel, DraftKings. If you need your daily projections, that's the place you're going to want to go. And of course, we thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're free on all the platforms and appreciate all the support that you give us. And remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for the apps that you no longer want, and can even negotiate better prices on those that you want to keep. Sir, how are we on a Thursday ahead of what will be another shorthanded matchup with the Philadelphia 76ers for the Brooklyn Nets? But still, if it's me, I'm really feeling the vibes and energy of coming off of that win. I still get to feel good about what the Brooklyn Nets did in that last matchup, taking care of the Toronto Raptors.
I was buzzing like most of the night, even after we got done. We podcasted right after the game. I was still feeling like very excited about what happened that game, all the narratives that came out of it, the way the players talked, the post game stuff about not wanting to, knowing Katie talked about having the idea that they could have punted the game and just chose not to. And the unbelievable amount of pride that came through just in the post game press conference stuff from those players, and rightfully so, that that's a sort of hang your hat on a game, because they had every right to just lose. No one would have blamed them for it. No one would have said anything about it, because when you start rookies that have never played and all of a sudden rookies are playing 40 minutes and you play against a mostly full strength Toronto team who has good personnel and a great coach and all this stuff, there's so many ways you could have just couched the loss. And you could just see that the fact that they didn't, it's not like a turning point of the season or anything, but I thought galvanizing is probably the word. It was this galvanizing moment for the team, and especially around these rookies who played so far above their weight that it's actually kind of hard to fathom. And it was sort of a national story. If you did some rounds around some of the other just sort of voices in sort of the NBA ecosystem, plenty of Kessler Edwards I heard mentioned on national stuff today. In passing, but still, the dude was in the G League 2 minutes ago.
Big part of the package on ESPN SportsCenter highlights, they were highlighting that he was knocking down outside shots and mentioning him by name for sure. So it definitely carried. And to your point, because we're going to get into a couple extra players that we didn't get to touch on coming out of that game, and then get a sense of what we think can carry over in the big picture here for some of these young players. But I loved Kevin Durant in the post game. I mean, we said this before about him. He loves to play basketball, but that idea, they asked him about his ankle. He said, I felt good in the morning. I pretty much knew I was going to play. So there wasn't a lot of doubt around that. And the sense of me being out there obviously meant we had enough players to get out there and actually play the game. And the opportunity, like he said, the opportunity to play with these young guys and see them get rewarded for the hard work you put in. Because the thing that we don't talk about, most people don't talk about on a daily basis, is what's going on at practice, right? Well, these guys have been up and down, like you said, Kessler Edwards, Day'Ron Sharpe, David Duke Jr., even Cam Thomas. They've been up and down from the G League. Some of them are now permanently here, but they've been around the starters in Brooklyn. They've had practice sessions with them. So if you're Kevin Durant, you see these young guys and see that they are capable of something, and it's great to see them get rewarded. So it's like he came across as excited about that game as Kessler Edwards did to get his first career double-double.
For sure, and that's why he's a great leader. And I kind of actually thought, like, I kind of sat for a little while longer last night and thought about Durant and thought about just how, and I think we mentioned on the podcast, and but I can't totally remember now because I was just like, on cloud nine and just kind of out of my blacked out for the entire podcast and just in excitement. But just the amount of leadership this guy exudes, and he's just never really been thought of as a leader, right? Like you don't think of Kevin Durant as, because he's not he's not rah-rah. He's not a guy that, he's that, heavy clapping and getting like pulling guys into the huddle. But he's not that kind of leader. But leaders come in all different shapes and sizes, obviously. And his version of it is almost bringing like an enthusiasm around the game that probably is very similar to what he had when he was like at Texas, basically, or younger, right? Like, I don't think that enthusiasm and drive is still there. And the sort of the drive to want other players to be better without belittling them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you think back to like the Last Dance stuff, like with Jordan, and how, like, with Ron Harper and these other guys, and he basically was like, well, the way I'm going to build you up is to absolutely just cut your legs out like constantly. And it's just like, well, that's an odd approach, but okay.
I'm going to tear you down. And then if you build yourself back up, kudos to you, good sir. But either way.
Yeah, well, then you're like, you have equal standing with me because you were able to withstand the duress, right? Like,
Right.
that doesn't make any sense. And by the way, that can just work. There's situations where that works, so whatever. But Durant doesn't have that. His is kind of this nurturing / I'll get tough on you when you need to, but have confidence. It's actually like a have confidence in yourself, kid. Like, go, like, hey, you made it to the NBA. You are in the NBA now. Go have some confidence. You didn't make it here by accident. Cam Thomas, shoot the ball, right? Like, Kessler Edwards, go shoot the ball. Like, this is why you're here. And I think that stuff really, really matters. And I actually don't think he gets enough credit for it in like larger circles because it doesn't come across as leadership, but it so clearly is.
Yeah, and you can see that evolution too, right? Players evolve over time, and if you're Kevin Durant, I would assume that the time away from the game, we've referenced to this as well. His time away from the game, maybe he started to appreciate that interaction even more than he had, as far as helping younger players get better and helping them evolve, and knowing that he can make, especially, listen, when you're on a team and you need these guys to do well, it's only going to benefit you if you help them get to a better place, whether it's through playing against them in practice or just coaching them up, so to speak, when you're on the court. So it only makes sense that off the top of the show, we still do find ourselves glowing also about Kevin Durant, who had a triple-double in that game. But there were some more rookies that we wanted to get into, and I'll throw young players as well. Nic Claxton, we didn't touch on. We mentioned him in passing, Day'Ron Sharpe, because he played fairly insignificant minutes. However, inside of those minutes, I think, this is a product of the way the game is going and where you're going to get value. So it's the same thing. We're going to get to Cam Thomas too, having an off shooting night. So he's not going to be able to help you get that lift. And then Patty Mills comes in and seems like the right move by Steve Nash. But Day'Ron Sharpe, I just thought only 13 minutes, makes his 3 field goals, struggles at the line, but 7 overall rebounds. If you want to look at this roster from the standpoint of needing an energy boost, needing a guy that you can just go out there and clearly has a nose for rebounds, you give me 7 over 13, you're showing me that you at least have this function, and that's not insignificant for this Brooklyn Nets roster.
Yeah, this has been sometimes a point of contention around Nets folks, is that the rebounding numbers aren't always where you want to be. Opponent second chance points for a long time. That's gotten a little bit better, I think. But for the most part, opponent second chance points was always a problem for the Nets because of overall size. I think some of it was stylistic and a choice they've made to just not really sell out for defensive rebounding purposes. But like the part where he's able to, and like definitely has this skill, we saw early moments of this already. Like, we kind of knew this was in his bag. This high energy, does have a nose for the ball. His size is pretty good. He has a sense of like the boxing out is good, and like just the overall where to be idea around offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding is a part of his skill set, and it's clearly part of, it's probably, I mean, we haven't seen much of him, but it's probably his best skill, or his most NBA ready skill right now. Okay. Yeah. So I would put it that way. Right. And so I still think that it's like so raw. You don't like to be a big man in the NBA, to be like just a prototypical center, to play a lot of minutes at this point. You have to be so good at pretty much like your defense needs to be so good and elite on like the switching end, and you probably have to be at least a functional around the basket lob threat with
Yep.
athleticism. And if you're not all of that stuff, like it is really hard to find minutes in the NBA. So while I think I was really encouraged by what we saw from him, I mean, were you in any way surprised? I wasn't surprised by it at all. Like it was,
No.
I think that's what we know he is. I think just the problem is that skill set, if that's it, is great in spurts, and that's kind of where it ends. So
Sure.
happy to have him. I think it probably gets better from here, but I'm like not shocked that was all even with a 7 and 13 minutes. I'm not shocked that it was only 13 minutes in a game like this.
No, because to your point, right, there, your other players are going to function just as effectively on the offensive end. You feel more confident in certain players. We mentioned Kessler Edwards so much. His rebounding was a big part of the success in that win as well. So when you see it coming from other places, you want to have as many bodies out there that can function in as many phases as possible. And we know that's not where Day'Ron Sharpe is yet. I think as we've hoped on other players over time that come in at the so-called five position, the shooting, you have to start to show some other type of range, or as we've said with Nic Claxton, show that you can be exponentially versatile on the defensive end, where all of a sudden that value expands a little bit. And that's also a guy that we lump into this group. Although, but this guy does kind of fall in the same category. Because go ahead.
Well, yeah, like I actually have one more point about him, about Day'Ron and his minutes and stuff too. Because I think there's actually something whenever we're crying to, not us, but like whenever anyone's crying to have more minutes out of some of these guys, there's usually a pretty functional reason why it might not always come, even though it looks good in these spurts. We'll get to that 1 second. First, you've been hearing us talk about prize picks. If you're into daily fantasy, we mentioned daily fantasy at the beginning of the podcast. If you're on some of these big operators, it's salaries. You're up against pros. Like you're trying to figure out how to get enough lineups in. Don't worry about that anymore. Go to PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy made easy. If you haven't checked it out, you're just completely missing out. It's for the fan just like you. And PrizePicks is the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. They have more props than anybody else when it comes to NBA. And forget it, like they blow away these other DFS operators when it comes to the prop pick stuff. You can get up into the superstar players if you want for the props, or you go down to the bench players. If you're a big fan of the NBA, you have to be over there. You can really take advantage. Any prop you can think of: points, assists, rebounds, threes made, all this. Basically, every player and every prop that you can think of is up there on PrizePicks. Take advantage. All you have to do right now, you go there, you deposit over on PrizePicks. They're going to 100% instant match it up to $100, but you have to use the promo code NBA. Pick 2 to 5 players and the over-unders in their projections. You can win up to 10x. It's 10 times, folks, on any entry. And it's just you versus the projected numbers. You're not up against these other sharks in the water on these other sites. PrizePicks has really made it easy. You can mix up the sports too. You can do a little NFL, a little NBA, kind of pile it all together. They make it super simple. Interface is about as easy it is to use. Go to prizepicks.com today. Use the promo code NBA. Go to your app store and download the app. PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. If you're not playing PrizePicks, you honestly don't know what you're missing.
Bonus point on Day'Ron Sharpe before we get into a little bit of Nic Claxton.
Okay, so real quick about him. So where the minutes are, recognize this about how NBA minutes are structured around, specifically around bigs. All you have to figure out with why he doesn't play bigger minutes, even if you saw spurts of really good stretches, is that you can never play 2 of these guys together. Like you can play multiple wings together or multiple guards together because their play is versatile enough that they can do different things, score, defend, right? Like they can add enough. But once you get the further ends, like there's a reason why NBA positions go 1 through 5, right? There's a reason why it's harder to play lots of ones together, like more than or lots of fives together, right?
Right.
Like the math doesn't work. Like as if you think of 1 through 5 as a curve, like you can't pile too much either at one end or the other, and that's why the NBA has become all about wings. Like you could have 5 Kevin Durants on your team and win the championship, right? Like
That'll work out.
But you might not be able to have 5 Jokic's, right? Like, so like because I'm just kind of making that up, but like there's a reason why as you get further out in terms of difference in skill sets, you can't do it together. So with Sharpe is maybe he would be functional, but he simply cannot play with any of these other guys. Like he cannot be on the court with Claxton at the same time. Aldridge,
Sure.
Blake, Nate, like all these guys that already playing minutes, he cannot share the court with them like these other guys can sometimes mix and match. And sometimes it's just that easy to see why these guys don't get a lot of minutes. And that's why it's going to be tough for him. Like he needs like a situation like this where literally everyone's out. And then he can get his third, and then he can only get 13 because he still cannot share the court with those guys, right? So
you can't run Claxton and Sharpe out there together and say, so what we're going to do is not shoot from anywhere and specifically only function in and around the rim.
So they're just going to stand in the same spot. Like they're going to stand in the same spot and it's going to be a disaster. So anyway, I just want to like really try to, for those that didn't understand about why he can't get minutes, sometimes it's not a function as much of his skill as that it's just his skill overlaps with too many other guys that are also kind of just as good. And that's going to prohibit him from playing.
I have an interesting, maybe we'll get to it today or I'll save it for the end of the week, maybe on a mailbag episode as far as what could lie ahead for the Brooklyn Nets and these functional players inside of the rotations. We want to get to Nic Claxton. I'm gonna bookend inside of Day'Ron Sharpe had a bit of I'll call it an altercation with Boucher in this one where it looked like he was trying to, Boucher that is, pump up his own team after a offensive foul call going the other way and has a guttural scream in Day'Ron Sharpe's face. I couple that with Trent Jr. being unwilling to release the basketball when Nic Claxton had it out above the break. And it just, in both scenarios, by the way, because you're only playing with 8 guys, I thought tip of the hat to Day'Ron Sharpe. Dude screamed in your face. At the very least, you might just give him a little nudge like, hey, get out of my personal space. And instead, Day'Ron just kind of had a look of humor and also slight confusion. Claxton, on the other hand, we've seen this a couple of times with him. I think that as he gets his legs underneath him here, he's also trying to establish a little bit that he's not the biggest guy. We all know that. But he's been trying to establish you're not pushing me around. I may not be the biggest guy in the world, but I'm not backing down from these. I know Trent is maybe the ideal matchup for an altercation like that. But there does seem a little bit of chippiness that comes with confidence for Nic Claxton.
Yeah, for sure. I think that he's probably made his peace with the idea that his role now is defensive stopper and every once in a while catch a lob or grab an offensive rebound. Like that's what at least his current NBA game is. But when you're a defensive stopper, I think so much of that is like sort of confidence and attitude that it's like easy to carry it over into this other stuff because it means a lot of physicality. It means being put on an island a lot. Like it is actually in some ways very singular in the way that his game is presented to everybody else. Like how often do you think about him getting switched onto a smaller guard and you see those hands up and he's awesome at it. Like watch him next time that he gets switched out onto the perimeter on these guys. The one hand, the right, the right hand is usually very high up in the air and the left hand is down to like make it look like a soccer goalie. It's like, wow, that goal looked really big, but now that he has hands out, actually there's no place for me to put the ball, right? Like,
and he's got that angled stance too, where he's, he's clearly preparing himself for if you're going to shift, if you're going to go, I'm in a position to do both things here because of my length.
Yeah, so he's making the court look a lot smaller now, right? Like, and that's part of his what it seems to be his core, or the beginning of like how he takes things defensively. Anyway, yeah, no, it's been easy to see like that little bit of attitude, like that little bit of like you call it chippiness. I think that's great. I think they need this kind of stuff. It's not blue collar because I don't think it's like that. I think it's like this. Hey, so much of me being a lockdown defender that he clearly wants to be. He said it. He's like, I'm out there to get switched onto and to shut these guards down. Like he wants to be part of that. But that's as much attitude sometimes as much as it is like it's the buy-in around doing it. And I think it means an attitude adjustment that is going to carry over into off-ball situations or like dead ball situations. And I think it's totally fine. Did he get teed up? Not last game. He get teed up 2 games ago.
Oh, I don't know. You know what? I have to go back and check to see. As I say, this past game, both these guys kept their heads cool, and it was I think on the screen from Boucher that you ended up catching a tee there, and Kevin Durant went and picked up that extra bucket there. So again, it was smart play from a couple of young guys. That's the bulk of the praise that you put on Nic Claxton, what he's showing you on the defensive end and the attitude that he's bringing. The little silver, if you want to just throw in a little offensive silver lining, there was a transition play when Kevin Durant is coming down and he puts that ball out in front of Claxton, where I had flashes of Jared Allen in that spot, of so many young bigs that we've had on the Nets. You go, I ain't getting that one. And it almost was like, you assume for so many players, the instincts took over. There was nothing for Claxton to do but to reach out, grab it, take a bounce, and go right up and through with a flush on that. And that was that if you want to talk about he's evolving and getting better on the defensive end, that's something that he wouldn't have come anywhere near going back to last season. So, I mean, it was a beautiful play. And in a lot of ways, I give credit to Nic Claxton. And I do also, top of the show, right? I give credit to Kevin Durant for basically being like, here's the pass that you have to go with. There is no gather that ball and go up, an area that Claxton still struggles with when he's flat-footed in and around the basket. In transition, full motion. That was a really beautiful play, and great that Claxton got that one to go through.
Yeah, good job remembering that. I had made a note about that last night, and we never got to it and just never rechecked. Like, that moment was like the fluidity around it was really encouraging. Because too often with Claxton, we've seen this hesitancy. Like sometimes the short roll stuff he doesn't make reads quick enough. The around the basket stuff, there's just not enough burst on offensive rebounds. Like it's too easy for defenders to kind of like take it away from him. Like we've seen this a decent amount where it's like offensive rebound should feel like an easy putback, has all of a sudden gotten harder now. Like it doesn't go up the ferocity. He's not a big guy, so it's always going to be a little harder for him. He's really, really slight. So that stuff. But yeah, no, great call on that transition play, because right when when the thought is taken out of it, it's not like the dude's athletic as it comes. Like it's not the athletic. It's not no problem with the athleticism here. It's like sometimes it is actually, I think sometimes this like his actually base skills are not very refined. Like he's just not, like he's still pretty raw when it comes to like actually having the basketball.
So it's really nice to see that from him. And obviously, hopefully, again, the long season, he can continue to develop that a little bit as well. Want to touch on Cam Thomas briefly in his game and then get into what are the takeaways that we can carry over from this game and probably get another very quick sample size against the Philadelphia 76ers, where the Nets are going to be shorthanded once again. But first, of course, thank you for making nope, that's not going to do it. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We want to listen to you when you give us feedback. We're free on all the platforms, and we appreciate the support. And that this episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and eliminate the subscriptions that you don't want and want to stop paying for. They have a concierge service that'll even negotiate better rates on the apps that you do want to keep. On average, you can save up to $720 a year with Truebill. Listen, the subscriptions come and go. Doug was addicted to satellite radio. He could not get away from it even after he forgot that it existed. I've had multiple subscriptions to the same services like Netflix, etc. All of a sudden, I find myself getting money back into my pocket. Don't fall for the subscription scam. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now to Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. So Cam Thomas now, and this is going to be a brief one before we get into kind of what we hope we can get in another sample size here against the 76ers. Cam Thomas has an off shooting night. We don't see him late. Patty Mills does all the heavy lifting from a scoring perspective in support of Kevin Durant and these other rookies. You can say that I'm going silver lining here, but this was the first time that we got an opportunity to see Cam Thomas in a position without James Harden on the court and being as shorthanded as they were. David Duke Jr. is not going to be a big facilitator. His hat is hung on the defensive end, at least initially in his NBA career, to try to be in a more pure point guard role. Picks up 3 assists over 22 minutes. I did like it. And I'm not saying that I would give it an A+ grade, but I like that when he kind of knew that was going to be something he had to do a bit more of. Maybe it cost his ability to focus on scoring, but it looked like he was comfortable, willing to do it, looking to make the right passes. And there was some growth there as well. And this is just me looking at it and saying he's only played a handful of games so far. We do want to see this piece of it because I think that helps expand what his value can be for the Nets going forward.
Yeah, I think that probably the expectation for him, at least with this one, was a lot higher, both for himself and like the team. Like I think clearly the idea here was that he was not going to play just 22 minutes. That was I don't think that's like not a hot take or anything. Like I think the idea was that he probably was gonna be playing 30 minutes and maybe even closing because they were gonna need his scoring like that. I think that was probably the initial plan. I like that they're pushing him outside of a comfort zone because clearly his comfort zone is to get the ball and shoot, and that's basically it. Like we saw this in summer league, we've seen this kind of all along the way. He is not really at any stop so far that I've seen. had it as part of his operating mode to pass the ball to people. Right? It's like find open spots, find your shot, make the shot, and have it go in. And so to be a really good all-around player, he is going to need to be able to do this stuff going forward. Like, it's all good now, it's all fine now. Like, have a role, be a microwave scorer, come in and shoot the lights out of times, and we'll live with the streakiness, because that's just what's going to happen. But if he wants to maintain like a long NBA career, he is going to need to do more than that. Like, there's very few guys that have maintained long NBA careers that only can come in off the bench and score. There's like 3 guys. It's like Lou Williams, and then and Jamal Crawford, like Jordan, because even guys like Jordan Clarkson and stuff like have gotten better about this, right? Like, they can do more in the offense. And so he's just going to, like Dennis Schroeder, like we saw for him, like, he kind of transitioned into a 6-man role, but he has a little more function when it comes to just overall NBA stuff. Like, there's all to say, yes, like, I'm glad they it's only going to take situations like this to push him out of that comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really work. And it was clear that they needed to go a different direction here, because it just wasn't kind of happening. I think that was a fine move by Nash too. There was a moment, I don't know if you noticed this, there was a moment during one of the Nets runs in the fourth quarter where I think Patty Mills had just hit a 3 and everyone's going nuts. Mm-hmm. And they take it to that little mini bench mob that they had. And Harris is kind of going crazy. And I hate the like body language this thing, but Cam was just kind of standing there. And I was wondering actually if he was feeling like, and maybe it's just like a trick of the camera and whatever. Like, but it was interesting to me that he
That's
did
my
not,
moment.
or not even my moment, but like, he just knew he didn't play well. Like, it's like, I don't think it's like, he just knows he didn't play very well last night. So, no big deal. Maybe I just caught like the one camera shot of it, and then maybe he was going nuts the rest of the time. So fine.
Yeah.
But I caught it because I was like, oh, this is interesting, because he clearly probably walked into that game like, hey, I'm playing 30 minutes and I'm going to jack up a lot of shots and this is going to be great. And it just didn't happen. And I'd be bummed too. Like, I get it. Like, it's,
that's what I was going to say. Was it's okay. Yeah. You understand it, and good, be bummed, because you should have been doing more. So let's carry this over. You've had a somewhat slow upbringing here into the NBA level. There's been a lot of hype, the positive relationship with Kevin Durant, and take a little lump where you didn't get to do as much as you wanted to. And now let's see you fire back, because by the way, as we turn our attention to, we said Nets are going to be shorthanded again against the Philadelphia 76ers. When you look inside this, you want to go another layer of silver lining here. Kevin Durant played 48 minutes. He was gassed by the end of this one. Also a -5 in the plus minus. So there's a chance that again, I'm not saying trade market, but there's concerns here clearly. But you also have, that's a joke, people. Patty Mills, 43 minutes as well, and had a big performance. So 2 of your big veterans, your superstar, and then your borderline superstar in a Brooklyn Nets uniform for Patty Mills, played max minutes, had big performances. You can call it a silver line that Cam Thomas only played 22, because now maybe no matter whether the shots are falling or not, you're going to put him out there for max minutes. But what would you look for now? What do we look for in this second game where all these rookies are going to get minutes again? It's not about the win or loss. It's somewhat easy to look at this and say, could be a loss coming here. Prepare yourselves, Nets fans. But what can these rookie players show you that says, hey, there's still positive trends here? It's not about the win or the loss, because I could have come out of losing that game. Would have been terrible if they lost to Toronto after how everyone played. But I could have looked at that and said, I still have all these positives that I can take away from it. Are there guys that you think are going to confirm some of the hype that we got from the Toronto game?
Well, I mean, before I get to that, I would say one thing to probably look out for is the sort of frenetic energy that the Nets had in this game. It would be pretty hard to duplicate that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we could see, like, now that the dust has settled and everyone has kind of probably gotten off cloud 9 with the win, and like maybe didn't even have time to think about the fact that they were about to play 40 minutes. And I think that actually all kind of helped the Nets in this case, against Toronto, with a few days now to have thought about it. You see this all the time in sports, is like, you get these great things in spurts because there's so much adrenaline, and like you don't have time to process it, and then and everything looks amazing, and then think about like NFL quarterbacks like this, right? It's like, this guy's our next guy, this is amazing, and then it's like, well, we gave him another week and everyone got to look at the film, and it's like, it just turns out there was a reason he was boxing stuff at like,
you're Mike White for a reason. Now
Yeah,
I
exactly.
get it.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Like, it's like, oh, right. Like, there was a reason that no one was knocking down your door for a long time. This is just what happened. So I would say, I think one thing I would look out for is to not, or not even look out for it, to not expect that to happen. I would say that this matchup against Philly is much more difficult in the sense that they have obviously one singular talent that is going to be very difficult to deal with, no matter what the personnel is in terms of Embiid. I think you're going to see some perimeter defense, like from guys like Thibault, like that are going to really give some of these guys a problem. They can just score a little bit better than they're just a better team than Toronto. I like that. Could probably just said it like that. And so, things I want to look for, I want to see if Kessler Edwards is still able to just like maintain some floor spacing, get the ball on the deck, make secondary plays. David Duke, can he maintain? Will this even be a good matchup for him? I'm not.
I'm going to watch him for foul troubles because I think that that's something that this matchup could present for him. Remember, picked up 3 fairly quickly in the game against Toronto, settled himself down. Smaller guards that you're dealing with there. This is going to be a different type of matchup there potentially, especially in switching scenarios.
For sure. And so I think that I'm trying to temper my enthusiasm here because, like, look, these guys, the way the COVID protocols work is this is going to kind of be the group for the foreseeable future here. There's an estimated 5-game absence, it's an estimated 10-day absence for the whole entire group that was out with COVID, unless they can register 2 negative tests within 24 hours. And it's very unlikely that's going to happen in the short term because these weren't false negatives. Like, these guys just got COVID. Like this wasn't one guy like LeBron a couple weeks ago where he tests positive and he's like, no way. And then no one else in the team has it at all. Right. And they all have COVID. Let's just put it that way. So, I think that this is going to be the group here for the foreseeable future. What I would worry about is continuing to overtax KD in situations like this, because like there's a world where they fall down kind of early in this one, and it's just tough because it's a very tough matchup. And I think calling the ball early would be fine with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like after the other win, I don't want to just I'm not predicting a loss here, but they continued, you mentioned he looked banged up, to really continue to push him so hard for these games like really don't mean anything. Like they need to, this is a tricky time here. So I think just watching the rookies, see if they're able to duplicate some of the stuff, see if Cam's able to just kind of like come back in with a little confidence, and also with the mindset that like we really don't need to win them all. Like there's a reason for that. Like you can't win them all and you don't need to win them all. They've won their fair share of games. They are going to win their fair share of games. This is a very tricky spot for them in terms of minutes right now. And they really, really they're on the razor's edge here. They need to be very careful.
And I think, you look at the schedule when they're going to get on Saturday, they'll have the Orlando Magic. So if you're thinking about using KD when you think it can be the most effective, maybe trying to save some minutes for that game where you feel like it's very winnable. Denver, Washington, and then Portland will lead you to Christmas Day, and that's kind of the timetable we're at as far as getting some of these other guys back. And then remember, they're not going to have played real basketball minutes. So it's listen, a lot of teams have had to go through this, so it will be difficult. I'll throw the last little bonus thing of, I agree with everything we said about Day'Ron Sharpe. I actually think that this is the perfect spot, though, to be like, hey, go bang against Joel Embiid. If you pick up 6 fouls in 14 minutes, that's totally fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but he actually does represent your biggest body to take that on, right? Nic Claxton's not going to want to take on that. Not going to be terribly successful taking on that challenge, I should say. And you're just going to have to live with the results. So if you want to save minutes and try to spread these things out, this is the opportunity to look at some of this multitude of 8 players that you have to choose from and say, who are guys that maybe in a game that could get ugly early, that we're just going to run you out. We're going to, Day'Ron, you're going to run out some max minutes in this one. And this is a part of your role this year, saving somebody else some wear and tear, saving maybe Blake Griffin some wear and tear so that he can give you something against Orlando the following game. It's going to be hard. All you can do is the best that you can with what you have in front of you. And to your point, win or lose, I just want to see all these young players continue to be consistent. You can be down by 30 points. Keep running the sets. Keep working the passes. There was a great sequence when 3 rookies all touched the ball and worked it around the perimeter before it got to a Kevin Durant triple. That was the perfect scene that you wanted to see. So stay positives, man. It doesn't matter. Over these next handful of games, I'm going to take every nook and cranny of positivity and dismiss anything when you only have 8 guys to play with.
Yeah, for sure. Like you went to the table, you ran really hot for a little while. It's fine. It's fine if you just kind of donk it off in like the next hour, but make sure you do not go back to the hotel room with nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you need to like this is the make sure that it wasn't all for nothing. And so if you won the game, it's great. This is going to be the situation here for the next couple of days. It's now time to take a measure of caution. I think before, and I think actually that actually should be the most important thing to look out for is their caution around not making sure we go absolutely nuts with this from now till miss, which is the timeline for these guys that come back.
Get us out here on a high note, Doug. Things are buzzing for the Locked On Nets family.
Oh, one more thing too. Just a housekeeping note: the Nets did sign Langston get the hardship exemption, so they brought him in on I believe just a 10-day, and it's
48 minutes for him. 48 minutes for him against Philadelphia.
He's gonna get like paid like $100,000, and the Nets are gonna have to pay like $500,000 against the tax because that's just where they are financially. Like at $1, it's 3 to 4 times every dollar that they have to go in. So whatever. So Langston Galloway is another guy they're gonna add to the thing. You guys got to go over to YouTube. The YouTube numbers over the last 3 days have been our 3 best episodes, including yesterday's episode. The day before was our best episode, and then today's episode. Excuse me, yesterday. Well, you're almost screwed up because we're recording on Thursday or Wednesday, but whatever. We did our 3 best episodes in a row. There we go. Each one got better. Picked up a ton of subscribers. Like we're so grateful. Ton of comments. Like I really say this honestly. Adam and I check this constantly because we're just so happy that people are showing up and watching the videos and enjoying the content, and we really appreciate it. And if you're not over there, make sure you like and subscribe over onto the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. The link will be in the show notes. Leave a comment too. We try to respond to everything that's in there also. So like and subscribe. Put the link to the Locked On Nets YouTube in the show notes.
Sometimes you got to fly by the seat of your pants. And guess what, friends? If you have everything under control, you're not moving fast enough. Mario Andretti.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. Fast as lightning, that guy. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.